All right, Lightroom and Photoshop. Lightroom and Photoshop together should run you about 10 bucks a month. It is a small price to pay to be able to do the amazing things you can do to your images. I like bringing my shoots into Lightroom first, picking what I want to use and exporting it. And when I export it, I give it a fancy name. So the client, oh wow, he changed the names of every single picture and made it specifically for me. It's the little things that make you stand out from everyone else. So I drag and drop the images into Lightroom. From there, I look to see which ones I want to use. I make sure that there's no blur, nothing's too overexposed or too underexposed. All right. So you've dragged everything into Lightroom. You import it, and then you're gonna have all your images to view. Wait for everything to upload. I go down and I order it by file name, so every picture I took is in the order that I took it in. Now you'll see up top there's library, develop. Those are the only two that you really need to pay attention to. All right, everything's loaded. You can see your entire session. From there, I pick all the good ones, but you gotta zoom into it to see what you're doing. So you click here. All right, once you're in Lightroom and you see an image that you like, you can flag it to come back to it and edit it later. You do this by going up to the top, let the file bar come down, and set flag. And also a shortcut is P if you want to get rid of it, U, and if you want to delete it altogether, X. So whenever I get to an image I like, I hit the P to save it. Now you can go and crop it if need be. You can hold shift and it'll keep your dimensions the same. If you don't, it gets all wobbly and it's not going to be what printing sizes would be. Now you can go into the temperature, make an image cooler, or you can drag it the other way and make it warmer. Same way with the tint. If something is too green, you can make it more magenta, and if something's more magenta, you can make it more green by sliding it. Next is your exposure. You can make an image brighter, but don't go too crazy with it. Next is, this is your histogram. This is where you can see where all your images have and are missing light. So your highlights is everything that's bright, shadows, everything that's dark, whites are what's white in the picture. You can double click to reset this. Those are your whites. And then these are your blacks. Now we're going to skip over to vibrance. Vibrance and saturation are similar, but I find vibrance to be smarter, as in it doesn't make everything super bright. This, with saturation, you can completely get rid of it and have it black and white, or you can brighten the image on an overcast day. All right, now I'm going around and just flagging images. Those are the ones that I want to go back to and edit later. So I'll go onto filters and click on flagged images. And those are the ones that I ended up wanting to keep. And these are the ones that I'm going to go into Photoshop and edit later. Now, the way I export these is I select all the images. You hit Command, Shift, and E to export. You choose what file you want to put it in. And I always sort my files by date. So I know in October I took the shoot. Rename your folder. Now each file can have a different name. So this was their fall session, so I'm going to name it fall. I'm going to keep it as a JPEG, and I'm going to size it for their gallery and keep a watermark on it, my logo. So once you do that, it exports. Now I do it again, and I keep it as a PSD, a Photoshop document. I click off the size, so it's the large size, and I take off my logo so I can go back and edit it once they make their pics. Photoshop intro. All right, here's your introduction to Photoshop. We're gonna do stuff like get rid of those tags, and there's a few blemishes that are on my daughter's face. Yes, this is my beautiful daughter. This is what the end product looks like before. And you always want to make a copy just in case you mess up the original is not gone. This is your toolbar. This is your square lasso tool. This helps you select things, or you just want to keep certain things to be edited, like exposure, just in that one spot. If we go to your polygon lasso, you can make it whatever shape you need it to. Only the things that are inside of it will be affected. Here's your text bar. And here's your brush. If you make a mask, you're gonna need your brush. All right, up here are your swatches. Down here's your brush. You can control the size of the brush. The more you slide it, the bigger it gets, obviously. You can also, if you know what you're doing, go and download different brush types. This is your character box. This is where you can manipulate the text. You either go to the T or hit T on your keyboard for the shortcut. Type something in. You highlight it all. Then we go and change the color. Or you can change the size. Change the font. You can make it smaller by dragging it and catching the corners. Next, we're going to go into your dodge and burn tool. This is if you either want something lighter or something darker. Right now I'm on dodge, so whatever's in the shadow is going to be lighter. Now if you switch that to burn, anything that's light you can make darker. Once your exposure is a little bit higher, I'm going to raise it all the way up so you can see what I'm talking about. You use it at your own discretion. You can only focus on the midtones, the highlights, or the shadows. This is great for exterior shots where certain shadows aren't exposed the way you want it to. Last is the sponge tool that's also in there. This will either make something more saturated, or you can take the saturation out. Right here I'm putting more saturation in, and that's what you get over time, depending on how hard your flow is. Another tool that you can use is the blur tool. If you want to add a little bit of blurriness to the background or the foreground, you can use it at your discretion. All right, next up is the clone stamp. It's located right here. You can also hit S as a shortcut. Now what we do is we start small. You're gonna hit Option to pull whatever you want to replace, and then you move it. The smaller you work, the easier it is to work with. Now we're gonna move up here and lower the opacity. I chose 25 because it's good to replace whatever you're trying to replace, and it also keeps it soft. You'll notice the higher the opacity, the harsher the pen stroke is going to be, or the brush stroke. Sometimes it doesn't do the job, so you gotta raise it anyway. You figure out as you go how much you need. And the closer you are, the more fine the job you can do. When you're working small, you can go higher with the opacity. When you find that you've taken out what you want, you can do what I just did right here, make the brush size bigger and make the opacity lower, and then you can give it more of a softer feel to it. Now I'm going to move up to the face. It's a little bit of before and after. You're going to get some of the blemishes out, as you can see by the left of the lip, and these little dots on the nose, all stuff that you might want to remove. So we're going to go high with the opacity again, and then get in there. Any of the more prominent dots, blemishes, dry skin, boogers. Once you get the hang of it, it gets to be pretty easy. It's just a little tedious. Just get whatever is nearest to what you want to replace. So you keep the texture of the skin. The trick also is you don't want to overdo it. You don't want your subject to look like a porcelain doll that's just completely fake and not realistic. Once you find you're getting rid of the bigger things, you can start making your brush size bigger and working a little faster once you're more comfortable. Remember, keep it small and just work gradually. You'll still have a real feel to it. If you go too big, then it's gonna start looking like you don't know what you're doing, and just all around fake. Once you've gotten most of the blemishes out, then this is how I soften the skin. You go very light on the opacity and big with the brush, and you just start smoothing everything out. I like to start at a highlight point. I don't want to start in the shadows. You move the highlights around and you get a smooth, good looking skin. You always want to keep the layer underneath because it gives you a good reference point for where you are, what you've done, and you can see your before and after, which I always think is pretty cool. Alright, once we're done with the skin, let's smooth out the background. Same thing applies. You just grab it from another part. You want to keep it mid to heavy on the opacity. This is a good way to just pay attention to the details and make sure everything looks perfect. Before, after. Alright. Now if you look at the original, it's still a little bit brighter. So you want to go into adjustments and go to levels. Another shortcut for that is Command L. Let's make it a little bit brighter by dragging this over, and you're pretty much done. Now I completely understand that there is a lot more to Photoshop, but these are the things that'll get you started so you could start editing your images and making them look extremely professional.